welcome to Justice for All. Again, here I'm sitting in this chair. That means that Barry and John are not here. Justice for All is a call-in show. We talk about anything, but mainly we talk about criminal law issues. As John and Barry are not here, I'm here with my friend Trey Parnell. Trey Parnell is one of my favorite lawyers that I've known for 20 years or so. Call in tonight. Number is 850-432-7768. You always hear me say that the show is better when you call in. We're here to have a good time. We're here to learn. I always learn from whoever I'm sitting with, and more often than not, including this time, you'll see, I learn from the folks that call in. If you don't feel comfortable calling in, we do have this. You can text the same telephone number. We'll get it. We will read every one of your texts on the screen, and we'll do our best to answer them. And sometimes we get them wrong, but when we do the research, and we come back the next time, like we're about to tonight, and we correct ourselves. Trey, this is the part of the show that Mr. Barossett refers to as small talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you invited the right guy.
My man. Okay. How you been? It's been a year or so since you come on the Barossett Talk Show.
Yeah. I thought, I did something wrong.
Stop. How was the weekend?
It was entertaining.
Did you run McGuire's?
Did not.
I got an old roommate named Trey that won McGuire's.
Get out of here.
Yes, he beat Mary Decker. Remember Mary Decker?
Yes.
Shout out to Trey Urquhart.
Wow.
He beat Mary Decker and won McGuire's.
Yeah. Now I've done the McGuire's walk before, but not the run.
Well, we ought to make a team next year and do it. McGuire's
Yeah. In
prediction
fact,
run 5K.
We were the Parnell Lawprecons.
Well done.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
Not really.
All right. Well, I didn't participate in McGuire's this year. I will next year. I did, however, do something I've never done before. I live streamed the Pensacola Symphony this past weekend.
Yeah, you mentioned something about that.
Yeah.
I didn't even know you could do such a thing.
Well, I didn't know that I could or would, but I got a call from a friend of mine, and I could hear her talking, and it sounded like she was at some sort of an event, and I said, "What, are you over at McGuire's? You running a race?" And she said, "No, Gene, I'm doing we're performing tonight." And she told me she was in the Choral Society, and that they got together with the symphony, and they did Mahler's Movement No. 2, if I'm saying all that right. Is that anything that you're familiar with?
No, but there's a joke there that I'll let pass.
Let it go.
Yes, yes.
And it was wonderful. So what I did was, I participate. I sit on my stationary bike and I watched Leonard Bernstein do Mahler's No. 2. And then
there it is again. You just keep tempting me.
Anyway, the Pensacola Choral Society and the Pensacola Symphony are extremely talented, and all their stuff is not just live, but you can actually go to their webpage and you can, and it's moving. And I know this is corny, but it's the truth. Art is important, and I never thought that I would have enjoyed watching a symphony, but I absolutely did. So there you go, Trey.
I've been to other symphonies. I'm ashamed to say I haven't been to the one here, which I should, because certainly for a town of our size, we have a lot of things that usually only big cities would have. Symphony. We have baseball team, hockey team, opera.
Well, that's actually what she's a member of. But this is the last thing I'll say about the symphony. I had a nice time over the weekend. But the other time that I've seen our symphony is, during the 4th of July weekend. Peter Mouget over at the Levin Firm, he sponsors an event where the Pensacola Symphony performs right there at Maritime Park, up in that big amphitheater.
Cool.
Yeah, so the symphony plays while the fireworks go off. So that's kind of something to look forward to.
That is neat. Yeah. And to go lowbrow again, when does the roller derby team start?
That's right. I'll find out.
We have roller derby in this town too. There aren't even a lot of big cities that have roller derby.
No, we absolutely do.
Those are some great girls too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last piece is, a year ago, and I went to this just because John talked about it a year ago. We have the Sun Belt Conference Championship basketball tournament. It went from March 3rd until last night. Last night was the championship game.
And you went?
Well, yeah. I called up my dad. I said, why not? I picked him up. We went. We watched it. The Sun Belt Conference is a Division I tournament. The winner gets to go to the big dance, And Troy State, my little brother's alma mater, they won the whole thing, and it's something I don't think I'll ever miss it again. Yeah. Division I basketball is cool.
Yeah, and it's a great event to be having here in Pensacola.
You know who I saw there? You know who I saw?
No.
Well, all right, I saw Jim Barnes. Okay, all right. Yeah. I also saw
the man.
I saw Roy. I saw Roy
Really?
Jones. Yeah. Dad and I.
You didn't tell me that.
Yes. Yeah. Dad and I were sitting there, and just as the second half began, I looked over and I saw this figure walking in. Completely. No fanfare. No one even noticed. I'm such a stalking fan, right? I said, Dad, there goes the champ. And he's, just walking down the steps with his drinks and his nachos and stuff. And he walked over there and watched the whole thing with no fanfare. I texted him though. I said, I wrote, "Your house, champ." He wrote back, "Yep."
Well, that's
but
neat.
It's cool.
Yeah.
To me, it's like imagine if Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney were to go into the Ed Sullivan Theater with nobody even noticing. That's how it feels to me that Roy can come in our Civic Center and nobody even notice.
Well, I think it's a sign of respect too. That everybody, loves the guy, and so you don't want to.
Well, I'm all about
harass
that,
him, except for you.
I felt like folks didn't notice he was there. That's what it looked like to me. All right.
Interesting.
One other piece, and this isn't so much small talk, but I wrote down insurance. And this occurred to me this weekend, and it's not really criminal defense related so much, but I wanted to share it with the public. There are people out there that don't have any health insurance, and there are special events and special windows, open enrollment, right? I went out to see a guy this past weekend, and, I'm talking to him about his circumstances, and I said, well, there are programs for that. You can use your insurance. And he said, Gene, I don't have any insurance. And I called up my friend, Courtney Peterson, great guy if you ever need health insurance. Courtney Peterson, Richard Peterson's son. And I said, look, can you talk to my friend? He needs a health insurance policy. And Courtney said, well, Gene, does he have any, we need a special event. He said, his friend of yours, has he been to jail? And he had, listen, the point is, this friend of mine had been in jail for like an hour. But the fact that he had been in jail is an event that is going to be able to help him get a health insurance policy.
That's
so,
bizarre.
If you don't have a health insurance policy, the point is, I wouldn't encourage anyone to go out there and get themselves arrested so they can get health insurance.
Yes.
However,
that's good lawyer in there, Gene.
However, I'm just saying it seemed to have worked out for at least one person.
Well, sometimes you take those lemons and you make lemonade.
All right. I was talking about blunders as I sit here committing them. The two weeks ago when we did a show, the gist of the show was traffic courts. We spent a whole hour talking about things like license plates and headlights and on and on and on. And just as we were wrapping up, someone called in or texted us. And I still have the text. It said, is it against the law to flash your headlights to oncoming traffic if you see a cop parked and watching the traffic? And I mean, I'm watching Lindsay, and she was going like this, saying it's time to wrap up, but I had to answer the question. And I thought about it, and in the moment I thought about it, I decided, let's go conservative, And I thought, well, I'd hate to be in a position where some cop is accusing me of obstructing. Anyway, answer that question. What do you think? Is it okay to flash your lights at oncoming traffic if you're trying to, let them know that there's a speed trap? Can you do that?
Yes, I know the answer.
Wow, it just came that quickly, and I completely fumbled it.
I've looked into this issue before, but yeah, you can do that. It's fine. Yeah, if.
And you knew that before I asked that question tonight.
Yes, I knew that. Well, I think I'm a lifelong flasher.
That's right.
Because I've been doing that, for years, and this motorcycle that I have now has got like a great flash on the front of it. Mm-hmm. It's awesome. But yeah, you're free to do that. I think something that you're not supposed to do is like drive with your bright lights on at night, because that will blind people, distract them or something. But if you see something on the side of the road, officers with radar, doot, 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 doot.
Well, I love and admire that you just knew that right off the cuff, right? I'm embarrassed that I got that wrong, 2 weeks ago. And so I went, when I left here, I went and I played around on the internet, and I found this Tallahassee Democrat article from just January, here 2026. And what it said was that some guy in South Florida sued law enforcement because they gave him a ticket for that. The ticket was dismissed, but he continued on with the lawsuit.
Yeah.
And subsequently, in 2012, I think, the Florida statute actually changed to specifically say that a driver can flash his high beams, notwithstanding whatever purpose he or she has. So flash away, Trey.
Yeah, for fun.
For fun.
You know, hey.
But certainly to let people know that there's a speed trap.
Yeah, and I think that's just being a good citizen and community of drivers. It's to warn people, because if the policeman is out there to try to make sure that people are driving at safe speeds, you're actually sort of assisting in that by telling people, hey, he's up ahead, or she, and maybe you need to slow down. So if that's the point, it's not to raise funds for the government, it's to make sure that people are driving at safe speeds, then I think you're actually helping.
Well, I think so too.
That's as good as I can spin it.
We have a text message.
Oh, Lord.
Here it comes. It says, why would someone want to plead nolo contendere instead of guilty if they still get treated like they are guilty? You want to take that?
I'll take a stab at it. I mean, I believe it's a legal nicety that if you plead no contest, nolo, then the mere fact of the conviction cannot be used against you in a civil suit. They can still prove it up, but they can't use just the fact that you pled. That's been my understanding in part of why you say nolo. The other reason is that by saying no contest, you aren't admitting guilt, but you are taking responsibility for the act. So sometimes people would rather do that than say, okay, I'm guilty. You
know Charlie Wiggins?
I do.
An old classmate of mine, smart guy, really good attorney.
Met him a few times.
Yeah, he used to always say it's a guilty plea with a bow tie. Yeah. If you don't want to be treated like you're admitting guilt, but you just want to close the case, then say no contest and
yeah. And if you just sit in court and listen, I think almost everybody does say no contest. I mean, it's almost become standard. Although I think the last time I read the statute, to get a withhold of adjudication, you're actually supposed to plead guilty to get the withhold.
I had a case just a couple months ago where I'm wrapping up the case, and the prosecutor walked across the room and said, Gene, the alleged victim in this case wants to sue your client. And part of that, he's demanded that the only deal that I make your client involves one where your client says guilty instead of no contest. So, there's some reasoning there.
Well, and that could also just be the victim, the alleged victim in the case, just wanted the person to say they did it, guilty.
Of course, that's when I turn to the prosecutor and say, now, whose case is this? Is it your case or is it the alleged victim's case?
Yeah, well, that's the fight we fight a lot. So, and that's the question we don't always get answered the way we think it should be.
All right. Like I said, we were talking about traffic court last time, and you brought something to my attention, but I'd like you to tell us about it. Is there some new legislation from last July about boats?
Yeah, and this is a big deal. And the reason I brought it to your attention is because it went into effect last July, but this will be the first full summer of this new law that the governor called it the Boater Freedom Act, or the Senate called it the Boater Freedom Act. The bill allows Florida boaters to be free from undue government interference in their enjoyment of Florida waters, which is nice. But more specifically and importantly, the bill will also prohibit boat inspections without probable cause, which were previously conducted as safety compliance checks. So what's important here is that Fish and Wildlife used to be able to just get on your boat and say, hey, show me your life preservers. Where's the whistle? Where's the fire extinguisher? Do you got any fish in that cooler? And so there were people that were getting stopped multiple times in a single day. So it's hard to, go out on your boat and have a good time when you're worried about law enforcement landing on you 1, 2, 3 times in a day.
Trey, you bringing this to my attention is the best news anyone's ever brought me recently. That is absolutely wonderful. We grew up around here, boating around here. My parents is a major pastime of theirs. for several years, and every weekend, they'd get pulled over more than 4 times, in a given day.
That's
just
crazy.
because law enforcement could, and they didn't need any sort of reasonable suspicion or probable cause or anything like that. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, and when you think about it, we have so many tourists that come down to enjoy the beach, to enjoy the water, rent boats and things like that. And for them to go out and get harassed, really, for these safety inspections, I think it's nice that, look, if somebody's out riding around, being an idiot, yeah, pull them over. But I think this is important, and I think it's a good thing that the legislature and the governor did.
I wonder if if this started last July, I would like to see numbers in terms of, were there more boat accidents from last July on than in prior? That's what I'd be interested in, because I grant that it might be more difficult, to pick up a DUI, to have that reasonable suspicion of misconduct for a boat driver. And I get that boats are perhaps, a little bit more dangerous than cars, maybe, but I wonder if there were more accidents last summer. I hope there's not going to be more accidents this summer.
No, and I don't think this will cause that, because, law enforcement will still be out in the same numbers. It's just to get on the boat, they're going to have some reason other than to use the fig leaf of, we're here to protect you by checking your safety equipment. Because I don't know, I've handled an inordinate number of BUIs over the year, particularly after the Blue Angel weekend, and most of those seem to have begun with a safety check.
Yeah.
So what it will be interesting to me is see, if the rate of BUI goes down, because there were a handful of those cases I've handled where the person was acting irresponsibly, but for the most part, it's people that are just having a couple of beers and out enjoying their boat. Yeah. And
I'm being rude and interrupting because we have to go to our first break. I'm sorry. We'll be right back with Justice for All.
Practice coordinator for Derek Jones Facial Plastic Surgery. Dr. Derek Jones is amazing. He's double board certified, he's skilled, and he's been doing this show with Blab TV for almost 2 decades. If you're looking to grow your business, Blab TV has an amazing reach in this local viewing area. We always hear, we saw you on Blab Television. I'm Andrea Housen with Derek Jones Facial Plastic Surgery, and I am Blab TV.
Hi, this is Sunshine. Make sure you tune in every day, Monday through Friday at 9 o'clock. We've got what you need. Information that is power right here only for you on Sunshine's Corner and Blab TV.
Is it time yet?
It's time.
Let's start time for dinner.
Oh, terrific.
Donating pet food is one of the many ways you can help families in your community. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
I'm Kathy Holsworth, Artistic Director at Pensacola Little Theater. Join me on the first Monday of every month at 7 p.m. for the Center Stage, where me and my artistic friends talk about all things on the stage and at the Clark Family Cultural Center. Join us, won't you?
Someone wasn't paying attention. Oh, are we on? Yeah. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Listen, we got a text message. Text message says, what is a search warrant affidavit? All right. Ah. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate this one, so I want to take this one because it's something that's troubling me now. All right. In a search, if a cop is going to come in and search your car, your pockets, or your desk, or whatever, the cop needs to have a warrant, right? Absent exceptional circumstances. Well, how does the cop get a warrant? The cop swears out some facts in something that we call an affidavit, a sworn statement, and gives that affidavit to a judge. And then the judge issues a warrant. The judge looks at the affidavit and says, okay, this is probable cause, this is enough to justify a warrant being issued. And so, for years, I've been doing this since 1994, for years, the way it would work is someone would come to see me and they'd say, Gene, there's a search at my house, and the cops said that there's a warrant. I said, well, why? Why do you think they'd target your house? And my client would say, Gene, I have no idea. And I'd say, well, we need to get the affidavit. So to the question, I see another one. The affidavit would be turned over to us, and I'd go to my client and I'd say, well, it sounds like the reason that they got a search warrant is they had some guy, and his name is, John Smith. And
if they list it.
Well, this was in the 90s, and evidently John Smith, tells the cops that you were doing bad stuff in your house. And, so then we would fight about whether John Smith was reliable in telling the cop this and putting it in the affidavit. Then we had a period of my career where what would happen is this. The name, in this case, John Smith's name, would be blacked out with a black marker. And we'd have to go and argue to get that name uncovered and turned over to us. And we'd stand there in the courtroom, and the officer would say, well, listen, Mr. Mitchell, if you make us give you this name, then we're going to tell that prosecutor over there not to make your client any offers. Well, that's how it was. And that would be the back and forth that we'd go through. Then a few years ago, one of our local judges, I was actually picking John Barrassett up for lunch that day, and he gets in the car, and he's the most laid back, he's the best, John Barrassett, man. And he sits in the car and he says, I can't believe what just happened today. He says, Gene, the judge wouldn't give us the affidavit, nothing, and we both kind of sat and talked about how that's just incredible, and well, that's now the law. We can't get the affidavit. So the affidavit is what a cop writes out a sworn statement in order to get himself permission to search. And it's something that's being argued about right now because we're having a much greater time getting an affidavit. So I guess we kind of feel like, what's an affidavit? But it's a checks and balance thing. And there are dishonest cab drivers and dishonest waiters and different dishonest lawyers, and every now and then there's a dishonest cop, I'm afraid, right? And so if the members of law enforcement don't have to give the defense lawyers their affidavits, then we feel that that's a hitch in the whole checks and balances system, and now the member of law enforcement can feel like he or she can just, well, I can write whatever I want in the affidavit. The defense lawyer can never cross-examine it, never scrutinize it, and it's inconsistent with, I think, what our American system ought to be. All right, Trey, I'm sorry I went on a rant there.
No, I agree with what you said. I guess I'm fortunate because the last couple of cases I've had that have had search warrant issues, I've gotten the affidavits.
Oh, come on.
Without a fight.
The charm?
I don't know what it is, but I hope it continues, knock on wood. But no, to me, that is such a huge fundamental thing, because here is the government asking a judge to okay entry into your home, in most cases, and so that should not be taken lightly. I remember being told by member of law enforcement I'm friends with that there were some that if a particular judge had weekend duty, they would wait, because this judge was reading these things going, you don't have enough, I'm not signing this. And so it happened enough where somebody was actually reading these things in the middle of the night, and I'm not besmirching any judges, I'm just saying that I know, I've heard this one firsthand, that this particular judge was actually reading these things very carefully and understood the power that they had to allow these government actors to invade somebody's home, and they took it seriously like they should. Yeah. So, and I would certainly hope that, all judges do that, and I assume that they do.
Well, when I saw this text message, I immediately thought, checks and balances. If a member of law enforcement is going to get permission to go in your home, then you need to be able to know why. You need to have some clue.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm excited that we get this little conversation about checks and balances, because here's the first thing I want to talk about, and I think, honestly, it's the most important. I sat here in the chair you're sitting in about 6 or 8 months ago. Mr. Barrassett was sitting right here, and we were talking about something that newly appointed Attorney General Pam Bondi was doing. Pam Bondi is a lawyer from the state of Florida. She's now the Attorney General, the most powerful prosecuting lawyer in our country, And I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was that she was doing, but I sit there and I said to Barry, you know, when we're lawyers, we have an obligation, we are told that we have an obligation to bring to the attention of the bar when another lawyer is doing something so horribly wrong. And I said, I've never made a bar complaint. And I said, I don't think I'm going to make a bar complaint. But the thing that's standing between me and making a bar complaint is my own lack of confidence, my own modesty. I feel with everything that what Pam Bondi is doing right now is wrong, and I don't know how she's going to avoid a bar complaint. I said, she's not thinking about bar complaints. She's thinking about being in Washington and being the most powerful lawyer in the country. But this is so black and white. I remember having those thoughts. And then today, you know, we're in this organization, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Trey's on the board for the Florida Association of Criminal Defense.
No, you're confusing me with Jason
I thought you were the
Cromie.
chapter representative.
Well,
Yeah, that's on the board.
Okay, well,
I did
all
that
right.
for 12 years, you know.
Yes.
I was telling people I was on the board.
You know how hard it is to wear those big shoes?
Very good, very
Yes,
good, very good,
yeah.
very good. All right, so Trey's on the board. The National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers puts this out today, and they say, we, that's me and you, because we're paying dues, we are opposing this proposal that Pam Bondi has made. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, has proposed that she, Pam Bondi, Attorney General, would have the right to review any bar complaint,
Including against her.
including against her, of any Department of Justice attorney, before any state bar association takes a single investigative step. She, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, gets to look and inspect and determine whether it's meritorious or ought go forward. That is so against our system. And why would she do that? But to me, we know why. But to me, it goes right back to that moment 6 or 8 months ago where I specifically said to Mr. Barasset, I wish we could go back. I wish we could, like, Jamie, pull that up. You know, I wish we could go right back. Because I sit there in that chair and I said, how's she going to avoid a bar complaint? Now we know.
Well, that's her plan. Yeah, I think her reasoning is, or the reasoning that's been put forth on that proposal is the potential weaponization of a state bar association that could go through. I'm not saying it's meritorious. I'm just saying that I think that's what's being put forward. But at this point, her solution has no problem to solve. So I would have to agree with you that, you know, it would be nice to have that magic wand where nope, not me. You know? I immediately sent this to Cromie, right? Because he's headed off to the board meeting and stuff, you know. And he immediately sent back where there's a prominent DOJ lawyer who's facing a bar complaint. We all get bar complaints. Criminal defense lawyers, we especially get bar complaints. And we take them seriously. You know, you imagine somebody, you know, we lose cases. Imagine somebody gets an unfavorable outcome and they're disgruntled and they complain, and they should be allowed to complain. And we have to take these complaints seriously. You know, the Attorney General can't just say, for my office, for me, there won't be any bar complaints. I agree.
That is so bad. This should get so much more attention. The fact that she would even ask for this, I feel respectfully ought to disqualify her for that position. You know?
Well, I don't know if it would disqualify her just for taking that position, but I think it does bring judgment into question because it is so ham-handed and such an overreach that it does make you wonder. So.
Well, I think it disqualifies her, and I would tell her so, my goodness. All right, listen, we got another question here, and we're almost to another break. It says, what is the deal, Trey? What's the deal? I feel like I'm making light and I'm moving on after something so impactful. This business about Pam Bondi is giant. Every time you see Pam Bondi on the television, you need to think, she's the lady that made a proposal that no one can complain about me.
I see a T-shirt or something coming out of it.
It's so bad. I mean, I hope I bump into her someday. I mean, it's absolutely horrible. All right, so we're getting light here. It is, what is the deal with a new license plate frame law? Now, here's the thing, Trey. I know that I talked about this on this program 2 weeks ago. But
no, let's move on.
No. What's the deal with this license plate frame law, Trey?
It's funny that you mention it because
I didn't mention it. Someone texted it.
Okay. Well, it's caused great confusion because the way the law is written, and I don't have it in front of me, is, you know, the frame cannot interfere with any of the messaging on the license plate. And the Florida Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles Department had to clarify, and they put out something on X. I know you're fond of X.
I was.
They say in this posting that the new regulation doesn't prohibit the use of license plate frames as long as the frame doesn't obscure the visibility of the alphanumeric number itself or the decal located in the top right corner of the license plate. There's also something else that I've read that as long as it doesn't obscure the state that issued the plate. So as long as those three things are not obscured or not blocked in any way, then your license plate frame should be okay.
That makes perfect sense. I don't know what's, I got a ticket. I had been given as like a birthday present some sort of cover for my license plate, and I put it on entirely to show appreciation to the person that gave it to me, and I was in Panama City, and I sure as heck got a ticket, and I said, it's clear, what's the problem? And it's been 10 or 15 years since that happened, but Yeah, well, there have been stories like that where, the F in Florida is partially obscured. And I guess the way the initial law was literally written, any obscuring of the plate was citable, and you've got somebody who wants to pull you over. All right,
there we go.
So now, for anyone that's paying attention, that's watching, for anyone that's watching right now, and for me, what would be wrong? What can I not do with a license plate cover or frame?
You don't want anything at the top that's going to block the tag and on a Florida license plate in the top right corner. All right?
Okay, the little sticker.
And you don't want anything that's going to obscure the number, the letters themselves. Now that could also be putting something tinted over your license plate, because I've seen a lot of people that do that, and I just shake my head like you're just begging to be pulled over. So I wouldn't tint the license plate in any way, and just be careful that the bottom is not as important as the top, and obviously the middle where the number is what really what the plate's for.
All right, very good. All right, we got to go to the second break. Come back and ask us more questions. Give us a call, text us on Justice for All.
Join the exciting world of television. Blab TV has an opening for an aggressive media consultant to help local businesses with their marketing needs. Blab TV pays some of the highest commissions in the market and provides the sales tools needed to succeed. I'm Director of Sales, Rick Wenzel. If you're an aggressive person who won't take no for an answer, send me your resume today.
I'm Emily Echeverria, Marketing Communications Director for Council on Aging of West Florida and the host of Coming of Age. Watch our show to find out what we're doing for our seniors and their families, and hear from area experts and local business owners about their programs and services. Want to help? Find out how you can work with us to bring a better future to our seniors. Watch Coming of Age, 3:30 p.m. Wednesdays, only on Blab TV.
A little history. When our founders drafted the Bill of Rights, they included the 8th Amendment to prohibit excessive cash bail. They never meant for it to hold people in jail. They knew excessive bail would create a two-tiered system of justice, one for the rich and one for everyone else. Bail routinely traps people in jail before they've even had their day in court. That's why the Bail Project helps those who can't afford it while fighting to end cash bail, because freedom should be free.
All right, we are back with Justice for All. We were talking about some important things, and we kind of got silly a little bit. If you have any questions, if you just want to stump us and make us look sillier, please give us a call, 850-432-7768, or if you like, you can send us a text message, and we will read all your texts on the air if this works. All right, I want to talk about something else. I remember Frank Bell in the 90s when
Judge Frank Bell.
Forgive me.
Yeah.
I was a lawyer in his division, and it was an important part of my career. And one of the things he said to me was, that, you know, you can write it down, Gene, the death penalty is going to be gone in our lifetime. And he explained to me that, you know, there are times, of course, where, you know, we put people to death that have later shown to be innocent. You know, that's one reason to not have a death penalty. It's incredibly costly, you know, and it's not really a deterrent, you know. And he says it'll be gone. Oh, and every single time we do it, there winds up being something wrong with the mechanism. So every single way that someone is put to death, that manner is later determined as being not just cruel, but also unusual, right? And so for these reasons, it's going to be gone. Well, that was 30 years ago, you know, and we still do it. So now there's this news that came out today, a guy named Charles Burton. Charles Burton in 1991, he and a friend of his committed a robbery at an AutoZone in Alabama. And after Charles Burton did what he did in the AutoZone, he was outside on the sidewalk, going to the getaway car, and he heard a gunshot. His co-defendant shot and killed somebody in the store. Well, both of them went to trial, both of them were found guilty, and both of them were given the death penalty, right?
And I'm with you so far, and I understand those sentences.
Yeah, and one of the questions that came last week was, what is a 3850? Right?
I didn't know we were going to talk all these.
Yeah. Right. So 3850 is the number in Florida that's used, where a person is asserting that his or her lawyer did not provide effective representation, and that's probably the number one reason cases come back on appeal, that representation was not effective. It's a complaint against the lawyer. Unless you work for the DOJ, I suppose. All right.
Not yet.
Not yet. Anyway, yeah, that joke didn't even work. But anyway, this guy, Charles Burton's co-defendant gets sentenced to die, but the appellate court found that his attorney was ineffective. So his death sentence was overturned. And as a result, you know, it gets massaged, and Charles Burton's co-defendant, the trigger man, gets life in prison. Well, Charles Burton's lawyer was not ineffective, and Charles Burton gets the death penalty, and he was set to die today, if I'm getting that right. Certainly this week he's set to die. And at the last possible second, the governor in the state of Alabama commutes the sentence to life. The governor says, I can't get over the idea that the trigger man gets life and the accomplice gets the death penalty. So I'm going to commute this. Well, you know, jurors were writing letters to everyone asking for commutation, you know, and the alleged victim's child writes a letter asking for commutation. And here comes. The child of the alleged victim, who's now, of course, an adult, this happened in 1991, says, you know, I can't get over the idea of this elderly gentleman, Mr. Burton, you know, being put to death when, if his lawyer was anything decent at all, he wouldn't even been his guy's lawyer had been his lawyer for 17 years. You know, I called him up on the telephone today just to get his perspective.
I got to hear about this.
Well, you know, he was filled with joy. It was like, this is the greatest relief he's had in his life. Clearly, this has been, if not one of his major life projects. And, you know, not only is it a thankless job, I mean, why ever be a death penalty lawyer, right? I mean, a bunch of your clients get put to death, and the ones that don't, you still get called ineffective on CNN. Just unfortunate. Have you ever done death penalty work?
I have not, because you have to have a special certification to do that. And I think you have to sit second chair on 3 or 4 death penalty cases before you can do first chair.
Well,
and those just don't roll around enough.
Well, here's what I think. I don't know that that's accurate if you're in private practice. I think that you could hire some complete goofball in private practice to do your death penalty. I think, and this could be another, I was wrong 2 weeks ago. I could be wrong again tonight.
We'll have to look into that one.
We will look into that. But I think that if you're in private practice, you actually don't have to do all that stuff. You should. You clearly ought to. Nonetheless, I remember when I first started, you know, I went to a death penalty conference, you know, in the 90s. And it was Chris Raby who said, you know, Gene, just don't get death penalty certified. if all the defense lawyers would stand up and not get death penalty certified, then it would be that much more difficult for any of the people to ever get put to death. I thought, well, that makes sense. But here, this guy has been this dude's death penalty lawyer for 17 years. Either you're getting paid by the government, which you and I don't get paid by the government, or you're doing volunteer work, because no one's going to pay you to be their lawyer for 17 years, right? I don't think.
Yeah, good point. Well, I remember I had a case years ago. It wasn't death penalty, but my client that I represented was in this unfortunate situation where his wife, who was a raging alcoholic, they had some argument. He was like, she's getting that way again, I'm leaving. And he heard a thud when he was out on the front porch, and he turned around and looked, and she had fallen and hit the doorknob and knocked out a couple of teeth, and she's bleeding everywhere. And so she calls the cops and says, he hit me. I was like, yeah, I did not hit you. So we went to trial, and there were 3 witnesses. There was, the alleged victim, my client, and their daughter, who wasn't in the room but heard it and was able to testify about her. The jury found him guilty, and that case bothered me for years, and kept in touch with this guy. I complained to prosecutors about this case, but thankfully I'd made a couple of objections at the trial, and it came back for a new trial, and the new prosecutor had heard me crying about this case for years, was able to lower the charge, give me a credit time served, and he was done. But I understand this attorney's kind of, you just can't let it go, it bothers you. So I'm sure today was a great day for him that this guy that got the death penalty, at least had it commuted to life. So.
Seemed like a good dude, and he seemed like he deserved a whole lot better than to get that jab right there on doggone
you know what
CNN.
A thankless job it can be.
Well,
so,
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Here's something. Did you follow all the stuff in Minnesota? Oh, listen. The person that authored the complaint by our organization against Pam Bondi, guess where they are? Minnesota. So the president of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers is in Minnesota.
Well,
how about that?
That's fitting.
Right. Did you follow all the ICE stuff in Minnesota?
I followed it somewhat.
Okay. I mean, here's something that the Wall Street Journal put out. Donald Trump sued the Wall Street Journal, right? And that suit is pending.
He sued everybody.
He sued everybody. Yeah. And his move was to, sue people that say things bad against him, and then if they settle for a dime, then he'll say, well, I won some money on that and I'm vindicated, right? The Wall Street Journal, when he sued them, said, we're not going to settle. So we'll see. That'll be interesting, right? Nonetheless, the Wall Street Journal did a piece on all the Twitter or the X posts by Donald Trump. And here's what they came out with. They said that there were 100,000 posts on X accusing 279 people of attacking federal officers. Half of these people that were accused of attacking federal officers were never charged. None were convicted. Now this is the White House posting on X 100,000 times.
Probably Truth Social.
It says X. Wall Street Journal says X. That the White House posts 100,000 times on X that there were 279 people accused of attacking federal officers. Only half of those ever got charged, and exactly 0 were ever convicted. And there were no posts on X saying, hey, those guys, those 279 people that we're posting about, nothing.
Well, maybe that's why they posted on X and not Truth Social.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, very
there
good.
You go.
But I mean, my point is, if you're a thinking person and you're accused of a crime, you seriously give a whole lot of thought to compromise, right? Because anything can happen, right? The fact that 279 people are accused and there are no convictions is hard for me to stomach.
Yeah, I mean that's a bad. I mean, I want
to just applaud the courageous people that fought those cases, rather than take a compromise. Because for sure, what if 200 of those guys had said, I'll take the equivalent of a diversionary program?
Yeah.
Then the accuser could say, yeah, we're right. So I applaud those 279 people.
Absolutely, I would agree with you. And maybe one time, if you have me back, we can talk about diversion programs.
Well, diversion
and how they're supposed to work. That would be a long segment.
Well, we got time. I think that we're going to do that. But here's why this thing got me. Protesting is important. But a few years ago, there was a protest downtown. And it was something that I thought was meaningful, and I wanted to stop, and I wanted to see it, and I wanted to listen. And to some degree, I wanted to be part of it. But I drove right past because I didn't want to be in a problem, So that's the chilling impact that comes along on people when they feel like, well, if I go to a protest, I might find myself getting arrested, and I don't want to get arrested, so I'm just going to keep on driving. So here, 279 people that were at protests that weren't doing anything wrong. Half the time they weren't even accused by ultimately the people whose expertise is charging people with crimes, and exactly none of them. So I just applaud those guys. We're going to take a break, and why not? When we come back, let's talk about diversionary programs. All right. We'll be right back after a commercial to talk about diversionary programs with Trey Parnell.
For decades, I've taught you everything I know. How to safely build a fire. How to control the flames. What to do with hot coals. How to secure your chains.
There's no sparks.
But I can only teach wildfire prevention. Only you can prevent wildfires.
Animal Allies is looking for volunteers, and there are many ways that you can help. From taking care of cats to using your computer and social media skills, any and all assistance is greatly appreciated. We have morning and afternoon shifts every day or help at adoption events. You can even foster a kitty at home. And it counts towards community service hours for bright futures. Find Animal Allies Florida on Facebook and Instagram, or go to aaflorida.org/volunteer.
All right, this is the final 15 minutes of the program. If you have any thoughts or questions, please call us or text us. We were just starting to talk about diversionary programs, and I want to hear what you have to say. Here's my experience with diversionary programs. When I first started doing this stuff, I was a lawyer in the public defender's office. Charlie Wiggins, I mentioned him, was my prosecutor, and David Ackerman, who to this day, no offense to Judge Smith, but I think that David Ackerman is the best county court judge I've ever seen. Tom Johnson. But what we would do is, if there was someone that wasn't accused of doing something so terrible, didn't have much of a record, Judge Ackerman would call us all up to the bench and he would say, let's do this. Let's put this case off for 6 months. And let's have it brought back. And if the person hasn't had any problems, let's dismiss it. And we handled hundreds of cases just like that.
It ought to work.
Right?
Yeah.
And then in my view...
Just a straight deferred prosecution is what that is. Yeah.
And in my view, someone said, we can make money off situations like this. And in my view, they create these programs, the pretrial diversion program. In felony, it's pretrial intervention. The idea being the same. You maybe do some things that raise some revenue for the system, and the case is dismissed. Do that. And after a while, when we had these pretrial diversion programs, I'd have clients, again in the public defender's office, that would go into the diversion program, and then maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months later, they would not do everything they were supposed to do, and they'd get booted out. And then the prosecutors would come in front of the judge and say, we're in a bad way now because we don't have our witnesses, because the case has been delayed and now the person's flunked, and we can't prosecute because, so that's when I've seen our local prosecutors say, here's what we're going to do. If you want to go into the program, you got to enter a plea first. And if you flunk out, then you're going to go right to a sentencing. And for a decade or 2 decades, if you'd have a client that would flunk out of the diversionary program or the intervention program, then you'd show up at arraignments and, 50% of the time, well, no, hear me out. 50% of the time, the prosecutor would say, Gene, he stubbed his toe, we'll let him back in the program. And if not, the question would be, what's the next step up? And they'd go from being in the diversion program or the intervention program to a very light sentence, And I remember it was Frank Bell, Judge Bell, my judge, who said, you guys are not reading the statute for the pretrial intervention program. It doesn't say anything about entering a plea and then being sentenced later.
He is
you
correct.
can call it what you want to call it, but you can't call it the pretrial. He held court, literally held court from the bench, and said all of those words, but it accomplished nothing. That's still how we have what we still have with regard to the diversion programs. Almost 100% of the time at this point, you enter a plea, and then if you flunk out of it, if you don't dot all your I's, if you get sideways, with your pretrial intervention or pretrial diversion officer, you're facing a sentencing judge. And these days, for the past couple of years, the sentencings have become harsh. I have friends that are in jail because they've flunked out of PTI.
Yes, and this is the thing. You read that statute, there is nothing about entering a plea. I've had conversations with prosecutors about that, and they say you can negotiate anything. The statute doesn't contemplate it, so I don't understand how the court allows it. But even once that started, most of the time, if there was a diversion rejection, then the judges, I would just tell my clients, I'm like, yeah, you screwed up PTI, PTD. The judge will withhold and give you probation, and then it's the slippery slope from there if you don't do the probation. But it was always a withholding probation. Now, in the last 5 years, this diversion programs are for people who have little or no prior criminal history, right? So you have somebody that's on a 3rd-degree felony, PTI, and there's some judges that will, or a lot, that will adjudicate the person guilty.
So now you're a felon.
Now you're a felon, having never been in trouble before, and you go to jail, a place you've never been before. It makes absolutely no sense to me. That whole diversionary program system needs to be rebooted because it is
Trey, we got a comment.
A mess.
All right, Lindsay, how do I answer this?
You hit Park 10.
Park 10. Trey, are your eyes better than mine?
That's why I'm wearing the glasses.
All right, you're on Justice for All. You got like a minute.
Yeah, Gene, that's kind of interesting what you were talking about the people that, I call that null pros, this 6-month thing. I never heard of anybody telling them they had to enter something and then flunking out and all that. Isn't that the same thing as null pros, but it's generally a year, what I'm familiar with?
You're hitting the nail on the head. John is the most prevalent, Yeah, and John, the first time I ever encountered anything like this, I was actually in Alabama, where John is. I had a traffic ticket. I was driving my grandmother back from Mississippi, and I sped and stuff. And yeah, you're absolutely right, John. It would just be if you take care of everything, you keep your nose clean, metaphorically, or actually, then the case against you is dismissed, or null pros. That's the Latin term that we use for a dismissal. But John, now, in order to go into such a program, you actually have to enter a plea. It's frustrating.
And the time period's wrong. In county court, they're finally returning to the 90-day diversion program, but in circuit court, it's still 10 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Which isn't contemplated in the statute either.
John, I appreciate you. How are you?
I'm just fine, bud. How are you? And listen, I'll tell you something else. I hope 2 weeks from now you can bring up this Pan Bondi person again. Have you seen her commercials where she's riding a horse around?
Yeah, that's no.
Well, that's a different one. But listen,
And
here's
she's gone.
Trey. Here's the thing. My friend John here, right? John, a year before the election, called Barry's show and said Trump is going to get back in. Write it down, and he was right. John,
too bad I was right. I think I'm not sure.
Yeah, I hear you. But I could take anyone. I could take Pam Bondi's mother, and explain to her what she's done here, and Pam Bondi's mother would chastise her. It's as wrong can be. I want Pam to come and to sit on the show and explain to me why she thinks it's okay. It's terrible.
Be interesting.
Yeah, I don't think she could explain it. It's I don't know, man. It's really kind of sad, the whole thing. Are we headed to martial law? I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, listen, every time we have a program and Barry's not here, he always asks me if John called. Trey, John calling is like FSU running a reverse. You know the game's on when John calls. So thank you so much, John.
You're quite welcome. And that Mr. Trey Parnell, he looks like an ace there. So you guys keep up the good work.
Yes, sir. See you soon. All right, we are getting close to being about out of time.
Yeah, but we could spend an hour on diversion programs, because that's just the first time that I had somebody that was adjudicated guilty and sent to county jail for 270 days. I outwardly gasped. I got court smart to see how loud it was. Oh, it was loud.
I would like it if the judges would have called us up and said, just so you know, we know it's been the past 20 years, people flunking out of PTI and PTD and basically getting sent back in. It's going to change. There had to have been some meeting where the judges said, let's start giving serious sentences to people that flunk out of PTI. I'd like to hear something about that.
Yeah, well, okay. I think some of those older school judges left and the newer ones came
Trey,
in, and there was a different idea.
We're getting, Lindsay's giving us the nod there.
I don't want to fight
Thank you for watching tonight. John, thank you for calling. Thanks for the messages. We'll see you in 2 weeks.